Wizards of the Coast have been having a mad year just gone. I think that it's safe to say that it seems like they've lost their minds. They've been tasked with creating ever-increasing profits by their overlords at Hasbro, who are incorporated in them. By the way, I'm going to talk about Hasbro and WotC interchangeably, because although WotC, Wizards of the Coast, the company that makes Dungeons & Dragons and Magic, is a separate entity, in a sense it was bought in and incorporated into Hasbro. They are one and the same now. If I look like shit, by the way, it's because I'm sick. Again, this is my third cold this winter. I probably should take more vitamin C or eat more fruit. This video is going to talk about the OGL, the Open Game License, which is a thing that Wizards of the Coast put out 22 years ago alongside 3rd edition in order to allow people to make their own content for Dungeons & Dragons, and they're now revoking it. They're changing it. They're changing it in a way that allows them to make money by doing minimal effort. And by minimal effort, I mean almost zero effort. I think this is insane, if you'll excuse my French, and it's just one of many, many things that Wizards of the Coast keep doing to piss off the people that play their games. For those of you that don't know, Magic has been going through a tumultuous time as well, with Wizards ramping up to print more and more products, allowing other intellectual property to show up on their cards, printing mechanically unique things in direct-to-consumer sales, cutting out the local game stores, and then culminating in a product that is a celebration of the anniversary of Magic's 30-year history, which was $1,000 for 4 packs. So that's 60 cards that were not tournament legal. And they were reprints, but not legal reprints, of classic cards that they promised never to reprint. All of those things that I just mentioned could be unpacked further in great detail, and I have done on this channel a lot. I report on Wizards blunderings quite a bit. You enjoy it? Do I enjoy it? I enjoy it a little bit. I'm kind of fucking sick and tired of some of it. But all of that now culminates with them going over to their other big franchise, Dungeons & Dragons, telling investors in a fireside chat with the head of Wizards of the Coast that D&D is under-monetized, which is a phrase that no one wants to hear because it's going to be a load of bullshit coming up. So they've seen that it's under-monetized, so they've now found a way to monetize it further. And it's shit. For some context, the original Open Game License is a document that allowed people to use parts of D&D to make their own content, whether that be modules, new extra rule sets, and similar. I'm going to put the Open Game License on screen now with a copy that I found online. It's less than 900 words. It's been around for 22 years. And one thing I really want to point out, the bit that I like the most, is that number 9.9, updating the license, Wizards or its designated agents may publish updated versions of this license. You may use any authorized version of this license to copy, modify, and distribute any open game content originally distributed under any version of this license. More on that in a second. Alongside this, we have the System Reference Document, which has been updated over the years. The System Reference Document is basically some legal information and then a load of rules. Rules for the latest versions of D&D. So instead of giving you the trademarkable characters, there's no beholders, there's no mind flayers, there's no Minsk and Boo as a famous character. Instead, it just gives you the basics, the base rules, and some of the more generic stuff, elementals and dragons, rolling saves and armor classes. This then allows you to make your own modules, adventures, characters, classes, feats, you name it, you can make it. It has for the last 22 years, barring a small blip that I'm going to go into in a second, for the last 22 years, it's allowed people to... It's fostered a creative community that, if anything, has been the backbone of Dungeons & Dragons, that has allowed it to get to the point now that we're going to have a resurgence in D&D. The critical roles, the showing up in Stranger Things, all these things are built upon a bedrock, a foundation of people creating their own content around Dungeons & Dragons. D&D is meant to be for the player, if anything, more so than the company that looks to leech money out of the monolithic monopoly that is Dungeons & Dragons in the tabletop role-playing space. However, during the release of 4th edition, back in 2008, they released the game system license that is actually quite difficult to find a copy of online. This was available for third-party developers to publish products compatible with D&D 4th edition, but it was panned by the community. It had weird clauses in it about you having to destroy your stuff if the license was ever revoked, and all sorts of shit. It was hated. 4th edition had a lot of issues, and this is just one of many. And talking about the game system license, Greg Tito of The Escapist in 2011 said, released in conjunction with the 4th edition took away many of the freedoms that the industry had come to expect with D&D rules, such as reprinting text for clarity in new products. This system was so restrictive that the people who made, at the time, the Dragon and Dungeon magazines, there were D&D magazines at the time, using the open game license and all that sort of stuff to talk about D&D, Paizo, they decided to publish and create Pathfinder, which was a D&D-like, it was like a port of 3.5, if anything, which was to preserve 3.5 as a rule system going to the much more video game-esque 4th ed, but also to avoid having to utilise the 4th edition's shit version of open game license. Some added context here as well is that Matt Colville recently went on record as saying that he was aware that 4th edition was meant to launch with an additional virtual tabletop, a VTT. A virtual tabletop is a way in which you can play a D&D-esque tabletop RPG digitally, which is like the future of gaming, if we're honest. Not only did COVID push this to be a much more common thing, but it allows people to play remotely, and at times that makes sense when you don't have to drive to your friend's house or a bar or wherever you normally play D&D. The VTT that was meant to go with 4th edition never materialised, and 4th edition floundered, was unsuccessful, and was considered one of the biggest commercial flops that Wizards have ever done with the Dungeons & Dragons game. The reason I bring this up is because 1 D&D, 6th ed, or the future of D&D that's not an edition, is going to have a tabletop virtual version of it. A piece of technology, a piece of app, a piece of software that Wizards are going to be putting out themselves. So there is a move here towards creating a holistic, complete, controlled digital environment to sell us D&D through, a virtual tabletop. And I believe, this is not really known at the moment, but I believe strongly that it will be microtransaction heavy. That every single part of the game will be cut out and sold back to you. And in some ways it's good that you'll be able to buy the parts that you want, but I just have no faith that it won't be predatory in some way. Please see Exhibit A, the Magic the Gathering arena economy. That fucking sucks. If you want that unpacked more, because you're coming here and you haven't seen my previous videos, I've done tons of videos on that. Arena Watch, there's a playlist on it, it's in the description. So 5th edition walked it all back and they went back to the original open game license. And in all of this time there have been multiple interviews and discussion pieces where they talk about how the open game license can never truly be revoked. Hell, look at 4th edition, they actually had to come up with a different license. And this quote I'm seeing on screen right now, that I'm showing on screen right now, is a quote from an FAQ with Wizards where it said, "Can't Wizards of the Coast change the license in a way that I wouldn't like? Yes, it could. However, the license already defines that will happen to content that has been previously distributed using the earlier version in Section 9. As a result, even if Wizards made a change you disagreed with, you could continue to use an earlier, acceptable version of the option." In other words, there's no reason for Wizards to ever make a change that the community or people using the open game license would object to, because the community would just ignore the change anyway. I've just blown my nose, it's bright fucking red, I'm so sick. Why am I always ill? Maybe I should look after myself more. Anyway, put a pin in that quote from the FAQ. That's some ominous foreshadowing for what the Open Game License 1.1 is going to look like. Now, for context and clarity, there is no Open Game License 1.1 release at the moment, and there's no official statement from Wizards of the Coast. Instead, what we have is reputable sources saying it's been leaked to them. There are articles all across the internet. The one that I'm going to point to as a reputable source is Gizmodo, who have been talking about the leaked version of the document. From 900 words of simple explanation with a supporting rules document that it points to 9,000 words of Open Game License 1.1. I keep stumbling on the open bit because I would say OGL and then think that's the wrong acronym because there's so many acronyms in this. Standard rule document, Open Game License, the other license that was with 4th that I can't even remember the fucking acronym for. It's all very confusing. OGL 1.1 has a lot of changes in it. Firstly, it says the old one is no longer valid. It then states that if you make any content using D&D as your base, whether that be adventures, modules, characters, classes, feats, or whatever, you must report all of that to Wizards of the Coast. You must sign up, sign this contract, and report that to them. Then from there, if you make money on it, you may need to pay royalties. Now, at the moment, in its current iteration, it says that if you earn over $750,000 from your product, you will need to pay royalties. 25% to be exact. 20% if you are kickstarting through Kickstarter, and another rumour is that people who've signed an NDA and signed up early have got a 15%. That might be why some of the largest creators in the space haven't said anything yet. I hope not. What does this mean for the average consumer? Well, straight up, not a huge amount. You aren't going to be paying anything, neither are the smaller creators. What you will see though is that people may just stop making content for D&D, uploading classes and modules and adventures to the internet because they don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of fucking categorizing it and submitting it to Wizards of the Coast to keep their beady little eye on them. It hinders creativity off the bat. So you might not see it initially, but over time, the amount of content that's online will slow. If you want to stay just within the Wizards ecosystem and not expand out into the surrounding creative spaces, then fine, whatever. But ultimately, you're missing out on what makes D&D great, that it's so customizable. What does it mean for people who have made stuff and made money right now? The critical roles of this world, perhaps, and Pathfinder, that's using the open game license, among many other developers using the open game license to fuel their first edition, maybe their second edition. I'm not familiar with either of them that much, if I'm honest. I haven't played either of them. Well, it means that they will have to start to pay royalties or stop distributing their old versions if they don't agree. It is all up in the air, and the developer of Pathfinder, the publishers of Pathfinder, have not commented to any news publication at present time, to my knowledge. They are waiting, I guess. Because remember, Wizards of the Coast have said nothing. This was meant to go out to the public on the 4th and give everyone 7 days whether they wanted to agree to it or not, which is a very small time frame. But they've gone quiet because everyone started to kick up a fuss. Only yesterday this was trending #1 in gaming on YouTube because Moist Critical has chimed in, also talking about how they're a bunch of greedy bastards. They also said that they can change the license in future with just 30 days notice, which is weird really, because they haven't given much notice for this one, and after 22 years they've changed it. So why they had to put in the 30 days notice then again, I don't know. So the 750 might be where it's at the moment, but what's stopping them from changing it to 50, or 40, or 20, or 10? And before you know it, if you're a full-time professional DM creating adventures, you're fucked. You gotta pay Wizards of the Coast 25% of your profits. Sorry, I said profits. That's wrong. It's actually gross, not net. I've cut a bit from the video here because I misspoke. It is gross, not net, so they don't care what your production costs were. It's not about your profits, it's actually just about how much money you made. But they do also specify in the leaked document at least that it's on anything earned over the 750,000. So you wouldn't have to pay 20% on a Kickstarter that made you 750k exactly. It's 20% of anything earned over the 750k at current time. But again, I don't want to fearmonger, but I'm not convinced that this could just stay the same forever. If there's money to be made and if profits need to be made, because that is the driving factor here, it's the driving motivation for all of this, I could see this getting changed again to mine more money from this well. Do you mine from wells? Beyond that, there's also the fact that they can just say, no, you can't make content anymore. They hold complete rights to say whether or not you can use their product. But upon signing up, you're giving them full rights to distribute your stuff via them with no money kickback from Wizards. This means they could put your adventure into a compilation collection, something like the Tales of the Yawning Portal, without having to pay you a fucking dime. All of this means that Wizards of the Coast don't have to pay for the production of anything new. Instead, they can increase their revenue share just by simply saying, actually, anyone earning good money on this right now, we want some of it. It's basically they paid a lawyer they paid a lawyer just to get all this fucking money as opposed to actually producing anything of their own. So some of you might be saying, well, you know, maybe we can trust them. Maybe they won't change the license further. Maybe the rest of the industry won't get hurt if they're not earning $750,000. But if they're willing to change this now and do this to grab at profits, if they're willing to reprint reserve list cards in Magic in proxy form and sell them to you for $1,000, if they're willing to then not try and give that to Magic influencers to promote, because all of us know it's bollocks, and they try to lure in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh players that don't know what's going on. If they're willing to engage in all these tactics to monetize their product, why the fuck wouldn't they change it down the line more? There's so much level-headed responses to this in the D&D community. Like, everyone is angry, but a lot of the videos that I've seen and the talk of it is very level-headed. And I was thinking, fuck, I'm coming to this more angry than ever, because I guess I've been doubly, triply burned by Wizards in the recent time with some of the shit they've been pulling in Magic. They are the cash cow for Hasbro. It's fucking mad that they're doing stuff like this to try and make more money out of them. But that said, the stock prices for Hasbro in general had started to dip, especially recently with them being downgraded as a stock investment option by the Bank of America due to their handling of Magic. So this being a PR blunder that's starting to leak out into the mainstream media thanks to being #1 in trending on YouTube and stuff, that might hurt them again. And that makes me think they might shift away from this. They might even scrap the whole plan if it's just going to make them look like fucking clowns in the mainstream media and have their stock shares dip again. So, how come this is such an issue for tabletop gaming? Well, Dungeons & Dragons is the monopoly. It is the monolith. We have monoliths in these hobbies. In wargaming, it's Games Workshop. There is just nothing else but Warhammer. There is, but it's such a small percentage of the fucking pie. I'm doing gestures that don't really make a lot of sense. A small percentage of the pie that it doesn't fucking matter. Games Workshop is the hobby. Warhammer is the hobby. You're not a war gamer, you're a Warhammer player. And that's another weird phrase, because a lot of people don't even play, they just build and paint. But anyway, that's the monolith. In card games, it's very hard for new card games to get any sort of traction unless you're backed by a huge company. Digimon's doing pretty well because their parent company is massive. But beyond Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, it's so rare for another card game to come into the space and succeed. That's why Flesh and Blood is often still talked about as being not real, but in reality you can see a lot more Flesh and Blood games getting played at your local game store than you can Pokemon. Like, honestly, not that many people actually play Pokemon. It's much more of a collector nostalgia thing, and that's okay too. But in the tabletop gaming space, it's not as diverse as card games. Instead, it's probably more diverse than wargaming. There's probably more of the pie is taken up by people that aren't Wizards of the Coasts and Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe due to like, oh, there's a lot to unpack there as to why. I sort of went to say something, I'm like, no, I'm not going to ramble some more there. But D&D is the monolith. D&D is the one that's in Stranger Things. D&D is the one that everybody knows. And that's one of the other problems. If this goes ahead, I'm done with Dungeons and Dragons. I will not play it again. I'm going to abstain, and I'm going to tell people to abstain and explain the situation to people. But that doesn't really matter. Let's say I get to explain that to 100,000 people over the course of a year or two. That's just a drop in the fucking ocean. The mainstream, the normies, the people who are just getting into it, the people playing in their kitchens, and the people who go down to stores to play who are a bit more invested, even they may not know or care about any of it. And that's the thing. It wouldn't be the monolith it is now without the community driving it to this point, to allowing it to be the big dog, to being the one that has the rules license that can make it shareable. There's an old anecdote that Bill Gates was very, very unhappy with Windows being pirated in the early days of computing software. It was pirated a lot. There was an ethos within the early computer adopters and coders and programmers and hardware heads and shit that sharing stuff around would further computing, right? So people would just share pirated versions of Windows. And then what happened was when companies like IBM and shit were trying not to have a monopoly on computers, and they had to go and find someone to make to make their operating system. Not so that they can make the hardware and someone else will make the operating system to help with the competition laws back in the day. They ended up going for the one that everyone was familiar with, the one that people already had installed, the one with the biggest user base. And that was Windows. And the reason it was Windows is because it had been shared, often pirated illegally. So then Bill Gates didn't get to where he is now, and Microsoft didn't get to where they are now by being the best. They got there because their program was pretty good and people shared it around. And throughout his entire life, he's tried his hardest to stop people doing that. The point I'm getting at is that allowing people access to your product for free will often make you the most popular one. If YouTube had a subscription service you had to pay back in the day, it wouldn't be anywhere near as popular or unanimous or indistinguishable from online video as it is now. Napster and then the rise of streaming and similar have also proved that if people can't get access to the stuff they want easily, they will happily go and pirate it. But if they can get access to it easily, they'll pay. That parallel is the weird one though, right? Because if D&D is right there in front of you and you've got access to a relatively good app because Wizards have infinite money, people will probably just pay and access that because it's easy. But if the community dies around it because people can't make their stuff for it without having to tell Wizards every fucking move they make and pay them royalties, well, at the moment it probably won't kill D&D. The problem is that they're already massive. They're already the monolith, like I said. They are monolithic in the space because of the community that has grown around D&D over the last 22 years and longer. But just talking about the open game license, it's the last 22 years. Of course, if Matthew Colville and Matt Mercer of Critical Role, if they go and make their own systems, if everyone just starts making their own systems and moving away, and those systems gain traction through things like Critical Role, which is basically a mainstream success at this point, then perhaps Wizards are going to accidentally create more competitors, like they did with Pathfinder when the 4th edition non-open agreement came around. And that's the point, right? This system is not fucking open anymore. It's something that Wizards want to manage and maintain, make profit from, and cut out the competition. It's one of the things supposedly in the leaked document is that they wanted to cultivate a community, but they don't want to allow their competitors to use their rule system. But that's the point. Can you even copyright rules? There's another discussion. Sure, beholders and mind flayers, that's your thing. But is rolling a d20 to generate a percentile chance of doing an action? Can you really copyright that, Wizards? Who fucking knows at this point, but I would love someone to take them to court of law to prove it. And that's the other thing, right? Can they even change this? When the original one said that they couldn't. And for 22 fucking years they've been saying they can't. and then suddenly they're like, well, maybe we will. How can one company damage so much goodwill amongst their entire player base of 2 separate intellectual properties and game systems in such a short period of time? Well, the answer's corporate greed, isn't it? It's the chasing of profits over anything else. Fucking wild. Thanks for watching. I've covered it in basically what I understand and added some commentary too. If you want to add any further thoughts, please do so in the comment section below, and I probably will do a follow-up video when Wizards finally respond. My hope and my desire is that Wizards pull back from this because the outcry has been too great and it's starting to garner mainstream attention. The moment like CNN or some sort of business part of a news broadcast talks about this and the shares start going down, it's gonna hurt. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more Magic the Gathering content, then subscribe to this channel. I do a little bit of D&D here and there, but from now on out, if this is the thing, I won't. And if you want wargaming content pertaining primarily to Warhammer, if I'm honest, check out PK's War Room, linked in the description below and in the end cards. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.